So this guy walks down the street to a local restaurant, sits down and orders dinner. And as he finishes his dinner, he notices an attractive woman at a table nearby. All of a sudden, she sneezes, and her glass eye pops out and flies across the room toward him. He reaches out and sure enough catches it in his right hand. So he gets up and goes back to her table to return it, right? It's the only gentlemanly thing to do. And she's feeling a bit embarrassed but thankful to have it back, and so she invites him to join her for a glass of wine. And so they have an enjoyable conversation, and she offers to drive him home. He's really impressed by her generosity and asks, "Are you always this nice to strangers?" And she replies, "Well, you caught my eye." Come on, come on, come on. Come on, it's kind of cute. Now this week I'm going to hear from people and saying that I'm a visualist or something like that. Okay. Anyway, in a book that I've been reading by Jacob Needleman, he was a professor at San Francisco State, great philosopher, comparative religions, world religions, all that stuff. And in the beginning of a book of his, he says, if you want to take the measure of someone, observe how he or she handles sex, time, and money. That kind of covers it, doesn't it? Yeah. If you want to take the measure of someone, observe how he or she handles sex, time, and money. And in his book, he talks about the money. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the others today. We're going to use money these next few weeks as a place to focus our attention, as a door through which we move into the light of consciousness. In other words, we're going to use money to become closer to God. Now, I know that probably sounds like a contradiction, and it's absolutely not, because in the science of mind, we teach that God is all there is. In fact, Ernest Holmes, in his statement called What We Believe, says the manifest universe is the body of God. All right, so when we focus our attention in a sacred time and place, like when we come to church here, we get close to consciousness. And when we get closer to consciousness, what happens is the spirit within us rises up and reveals greater truth to us. This is why we're always encouraging people to cultivate, to maintain some kind of an inner life, so that spirit within you can reveal the truth that is appropriate for your life on any given day. So it's easy to be unconscious about money. I mean, I don't know. I could be the only one, but I noticed this goes way back to when I was much younger. I remember working in a department store. I used to work for Bullock's. Anybody remember Bullock's? Bullock's, yes, I love Bullock's, yeah. I used to sell shoes at Bullock's. I made bank, I want you to know. I was a really good shoe salesman. I could talk anybody into anything. Oh my God, that was a terrible thing. I just realized that. But anyway, what was really amazing to me is that people would come in and they would buy their shoes and they would leave their checkbook behind. Or they'd leave their credit card behind. Or they wouldn't even take their change. They would just completely forget because they were so enamored of their new purchase that they just forgot what they were doing. And so then would be, and in a big store like that, you couldn't just like call somebody with their credit card. It had to go through security and all this kind of stuff. But what I began to notice is how easy it is for people to go unconscious about money. Speed down the road years ahead. I come to church, and after church on Sunday, we go through and we pick up checkbooks off the floor. Now today everyone's going to look for checkbooks after church, so that's great. Then I won't have to do that. Or people forget and leave their credit card in the bookstore, or things like that. So what I notice is it's very easy for human beings to go unconscious around money. At the end, I'll get my credit card statement and say, wow, what did I charge? How did it get so high? By the way, where is that credit card? Where's my wallet? Where did I leave my checkbook? Is it in the car? Is it in my briefcase? Is it on the kitchen table? What did I spend all this money on? Do you ever leave the house in the morning and you have money in your wallet, and at the end of the day you come home and there's nothing left? And you think, what did I spend all that money on? I didn't really buy anything, did I? And I just think that all of that points to our human tendency to not really be conscious around money. And I think it's uncomfortable when I see where I have those areas that I go unconscious. And I suspect that we all probably have them. In the Western part of the world, most of our attention goes toward the outer world. And about 350 years ago, with the Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, science became our God. Right? And so we moved away from having an inner life, which I believe was much more common, and which pretty much all teachings encourage people to do, to now just focus on what you can prove out here in the outer world. So because our attention goes to the outside, I think what the upshot of that is that we have lost touch with the sacred. We have lost touch to a greater extent, or to a great extent, with our inner self. Now, money largely rules the external world. And if you disagree with that, I would just ask you to look at all the things that you do in the course of a day and how many actually involve money. You get up in the morning and you make some coffee. Well, if you didn't grow those beans, you probably had to buy them, And so you didn't just buy the coffee beans, you went to the store and you bought a bunch of stuff, and all of that involved money, and we can just say that on and on and on throughout our day. So money has our attention and continually pulls us into the outer world, out into the world where we're interacting with people. One of the things that I think is so interesting about money is that because of money, we often interact with people we probably wouldn't normally interact with. Isn't that true for all of us? When you think about, you might not become friends with that gal who's working at the dry cleaners, but you see her regularly because she's doing your cleaning for you. Right? So here we're going to give our attention to the inner world, the world of spirit. And I think where we get into trouble is when we live as if the outer world is all there is. And so this, I think, is really the brilliance of New Thought. That New Thought, starting back in the 1800s, said, yes, there's an outer world, and it's not that this isn't important, and it's not that we don't love the outer world or love the things of the outer world. God, I do love my things. I just want you to know. I really do. Because I know other people have junk, but I have really good stuff. Right? I say that every time I go by a yard sale. I go by and I go, wow, what a lot of junk. That's not like my garage piled up to the ceiling. In my garage, it's really good stuff, So we get into trouble when we live as if there's only the outer world and that is all there is. See, the outer world, it seems, since this 350 or so years ago, the outer world tends to consume us. Now, again, none of it is bad. None of it is bad. We simply want to be conscious of how it operates. So it's not that we, I think, give too much attention to money. I think that we don't give enough because we're not clear in our intention about it. All right? This is the thing. If you're not clear in your intention about money, there will be more chaos in your life, in your financial life. So look this week, I would just invite you to look this week at how you spend. And how does it feel? How does it feel in you when you spend? I'm not asking you to do anything different around that. Just notice. Just start to bring some awareness, some consciousness, right? Because remember what I started with, if you want to take the measure of someone, one of the things we're going to look at how we handle money. So also we want to look at our relationship with money. We want to look at how we feel when we're doing just the normal things like paying our bills, even if you pay them online. Just notice how that feels, right? Because, we say that awareness is curative, that where we start to bring awareness, we can grow, we can expand, we can have some healing. So we're using money as a doorway to get to a greater experience of our own inner life. And so everything in the outer world, ultimately, now this sounds really negative and I don't mean it to be so, but I got to say it anyway, is that ultimately everything in the outer world fails us. And this includes money. That at some point or other, it will bring us to our knees. Figuratively, literally. Why? Because I think the reason for this is to find that money, see, the big thing is when we realize that meaning in our life comes from within us. The meaning is already in here. It is never without. And see, that's what happened with the Enlightenment, with the Age of Reason, is people started to look exclusively out here. When that apple fell and they said, oh my God, there's gravity, it changed everything. Right? So this is our second week in our journey of the heart. And so Like I said, I've been reading this book by Jacob Needleman. It's called Money and the Meaning of Life. And I read it years ago. And it kind of rose to the top of the pile again. And I thought, oh, I think I'll read this again. This would be a perfect time. So, money in a lot of spiritual circles is kind of thought to be evil. We all have heard some of that stuff around there. How many of us have heard that money is the root of all evil? I heard that. All you have to do is open the Bible and realize that that's wrong. That is an inaccurate quote. So it's actually the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think when we're in the love of money, that's when money becomes our God. And money is a really good servant, but it's a really lousy master. Because what happens when money if money is our false God, that leads to greed and all kinds of other problems. So, all right, so here we are in a spiritual teaching. And one of the things that I think Ernest Holmes was really brilliant about is that he married Eastern and Western thought together. So our church our philosophy, our theology is largely Western. Ernest Holmes loved the Bible, he loved Jesus, but he also loved Buddha. So we tend to meditate and do inner practices that are very Eastern oriented, and yet we also have this practical application of our teaching that's very, very Western. So one of the things that you often hear about on the spiritual path is about detachment and non-attachment. And I think that that's very much misinterpreted. I think people think of it as, oh, if you're detached, that means you don't care or you're not interested. And I think that's not true. I think that non-attachment, there is love, there is care, and you certainly engage. But with that simultaneously comes the ability to disengage. So I think often our caring, in our culture, our caring is obsessive because we obsess about everything. So we're afraid sometimes, oh my God, if I desire anything, I'm just going to become so addicted. But the problem is when desire turns to obsession. Just desire alone is not a problem. But if that desire turns to obsession, I believe. So non-attachment is to allow normal human desire to exist in all of the proper places and therefore nourish our entire being. So non-attachment, please don't hear that as non-caring. It's a capacity to care. It actually comes from apatheia in the ancient languages. Now that word has become apathy, which means free of devouring passion. See, I think that's the thing, that this non-attachment is about being free of a devouring kind of unhealthy passion. So Jacob Needleman, in his book, he answers, can we have a life in the world without being devoured by the world? Can we have money without being devoured by money? And so mostly, I think I think it's really easy for us to be had by our possessions. And so the trick is to have them and love them and care for them, but not be devoured by them. There is a place. And I think we probably all have understanding of that. So it's not a question of getting rid of our desires, but treating our desires, our thoughts and impulses as things of the world itself. Oh yeah, there's me desiring again. There's me desiring. I don't know about you, but I get catalogs in the mail probably every day. Catalogs of all kinds of stuff. Beautiful catalogs. Gorgeous, shiny, glossy catalogs. Pages and pages and pages of stuff I never even knew I needed or wanted. Yes, I mean, it's all kinds of stuff, and it's like, okay, well, that's okay, but Science of Mind teaches us that the world is not really out here as we have thought. That really, the world, what's really important is in here. The world is inside. And how we are toward the interior world completely determines how we are to the external world. I'll say that again. How we are toward our own internal world, that completely determines how we are to the external world. So we have to have a caring attitude toward our own inner life. Like I say in church all the time, or at least I think I do, that, we are destined to become deep people spiritually. That sooner or later, you'll give in and say, what, now is the time. I really got to start to cultivate this inner life. I need to be still every day. I need to be quiet. Maybe I do some writing. Because the meaning of life is a state of being. It's a condition of our soul in which and through which we act from our own divine place, our own authentic divinity within us. There was this old saying that, the purpose of religion is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Yeah, I like that. So we hopefully will be here to comfort you when you are afflicted, and if you are really comfortable, then maybe I will afflict you a little bit today. And because people are often afflicted around even the very topic of money. So in this culture, money represents an aspect of ourselves, and we should not turn away from this on our spiritual path. In our culture, money enters into everything. Every facet of life includes money at some point. It's sort of, he says in his book, it's like a dye that permeates every thread of a fabric. Right? So given that, wouldn't it be good if we brought better consciousness to this area? Because, in life, our suffering is because of what is inside of us, not because of what is outside of us. Let me let that sit for a minute. I'll just sit down here and have a glass. No, I'm just kidding. But really, I believe this is absolutely so. In life, suffering is because of what's inside of us, what's going on inside of ourselves, what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're believing, how we're being on the inner plane, not because of anything that's going on outside of ourselves. I need to have that tattooed inside my eyelids. That will be my next tattoo. Really, because our life is the way it is, not because of external things, but because of internal things like how we are. We teach that in the science of mind. That really, that's the deal here. That our life is the way it is, not because of anything outside of us, but because of internal things like how we are, the way I'm thinking, the way I'm believing, my state of mind, my state of consciousness, how I act toward other people, how I think about other people. It's all relevant. It all combines, Now, yes, there are, what do I want to say? There are people who are in lack and they are absolutely tormented. There are people who live at the under end of the scale, that they are lavishly abundant, and they could also be tormented, right? So money, I think, doesn't make you either way. Money, it just sort of puts you under the magnifying glass. It just magnifies who you really are. One of the ways I've said this in class is, if somebody is a snake without money and they get money, they'll just be a bigger snake. Yeah, but if somebody is generous and they don't particularly have a lot of money, but they come into more money, they will be generous with their more money. So the money isn't the problem. People say, oh, money changes us. No, it doesn't. It's just you're more interesting to watch when you have money. That's all. It is. There's just more choices at your disposal. So in our own life, we just say, well, when I have more money, that just puts us under the magnifying glass. It just shows us more of who we are because it just magnifies the consciousness that already exists within us. So temporarily, I think, it can make things better. Some people always say to me, oh, well, money would just solve all my problems. Money would just solve all my problems. I've really thought about that, and I think, temporarily that may make things better. There are lots of situations, if you can't pay your rent, money would certainly solve that problem this month. But what about next month? We say, well, money will solve my problem next month too. Well, then we have to look at, okay, well, what's the consciousness that's having difficulty meeting your needs? Let's talk about that and how we can grow and evolve that so that paying your rent happens easily for you. See, because I think long term, what happens is it amplifies what has caused people sorrow up to this point. Or it shows us where our consciousness, our thinking, our believing in ourselves, the way we're talking to ourselves, what we're putting out into the universe, how we've been doing that has not been as effective, as on point, as principled as it could be. So it is a great, great spiritual discipline for us to begin on a regular basis to look within. And admittedly, yes, absolutely, it takes work. It takes work, but I am here to tell you, to promise you that the payoff is divine. Let's pray. So we turn our attention inward now, remembering that right here, the fullness, the allness of God, God's Spirit, God's love, God's intelligence is right here. I know that each and every one of us is a center of divine consciousness. And so therefore, all of the qualities and attributes that exist in the infinite mind of God exist in us. And so I claim for us today that each and every one of us, we are a center of God's infinite abundance. That abundance exists within us. It's not something we have to add to us. It's something we release out from us. So I accept for each and every one of us today that we are living an abundant life, abundant in every good thing, in love and health and prosperity, in creative expression, and everything else that would add to our life in a healthy way. I claim that this is true for each and every one of us. And so we include in our prayer today our family members, our friends and loved ones, and we remember that right where they are, God is fully present right there. We let our prayer be a blessing in the world around us. So, wow, all of these things that have been pulling at our attention. We think about all of the fires in California and the people affected by that. And we have to remind ourselves, and it's a little easier in a group, to hold on to the thread of truth that God is there even in the midst of all of that. That there is all needs met for everyone, that there is love pouring into those situations, that there is a perfect healing, a perfect resolution, that God is working through firefighters and emergency workers. Everyone involved is touched by the hand of God in an empowering, loving way. We let this prayer expand so that it touches all situations on the face of our earth and say God is present in all of it. We hold true to that. We're not going to be swayed by the outer world. We're knowing something in our own inner world. We bless our church. We bless all churches everywhere. Synagogues and temples and mosques and ashrams, all paths to God. And I know that we are blessed by being together, that we all get raised up. And so with a full heart, I give thanks that this is so, and I release my word. And so it is. Together we all say, Amen. All right, we'll sing one.